Everybody get up! Everybody needs to understand that I'm more than simply a hype man for this rap group. Just like Geico is more than just a company that can save you money. Geico also has fast and friendly claim service, so they can help you when you need it most. And while I do love being a hype man, I also love reading for children's audiobooks. Like Little Bo Peep, she lost the sheep, and she don't know where to find them. Yo!
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
Blog Talk Radio.
Once in a lifetime, does a great author set the stage for a wonderful trip into the minds and lives of their characters. Yvonne Mason doesn't just write books, she crafts experiences. Best-selling true crime fiction author Yvonne Mason will leave you on the edge of your seat and checking behind every corner for the weirdos that only real life can breed. Find her books on Amazon.com. Make sure you check out such titles like Dreamcatcher, Failure Was Never an Option, The Pink Canary, and Silent Scream today.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is Thursday night at 8 o'clock Central. This is Off the Chain, and I am your host, Yvonne Mason. And yes, indeed, that was a piece of shameless promotion by my great friend, Victor Aurelius. Since I can't get out and do events much anymore because I do take care of my wonderfully disabled husband, this is how I shamelessly promote myself. But in the process of that, I wonderfully, shamelessly promote all of my guests. And I have to tell you, there's some great things happening with the guests that have been on my show and continue to be on my show. Paul Hurd, I just found out from him today, he writes as Thomas S. Mulvey. He's been asked to put his books and his bio in some automotive magazines. Some of the people that know him have asked him to put his work there. Did it come from the show? Maybe, maybe not. But the thing is, great things are happening to my guest on this show, and I am so happy for them and so proud of them for what they do. And my gift to my guest is when this show is over with, they get all the links to this show as well as all the podcasts, and they can use that any way they choose to promote themselves, promote their product, promote their dreams, and to, in the process, help someone else understand that dreams do come true. All of my guests and I are living proof that dreams do come true. And with that being said, and my guest put up a little comment that I laughed about. Anybody that knows more than I do in any given genre or any given profession, to me they're an expert. My guest tonight is radio host and classic car expert Keith McDonald. He's host of American Car Classic radio show on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at 5:30 p.m. on WAXE in Vero Beach. It's 1370 on the AM side and 107.9 on the FM side. And then replays of the show can be heard on 101.7 FM on Sundays at 7 o'clock. Of course, you can also hear him on iHeart Radio at www.iHeart.com/live/4788. He is a freelance writer, formerly at Vero Beach Magazine, now for Vero Beach Newsweekly, and that's not all the man has done. He was a BP contractor for Deepwater Horizon during the oil spill cleanup at the Pensacola base. He holds current certification in hazardous waste and operations and emergency responses. He also wrote several B movies for an Australian production company and the fight genre. Says it's not his area of interest, but he had fun doing it. So see, ladies and gentlemen, you just don't ever know. He's an author and a screenwriter. He's represented by M.A. Pauley Literacy Agency. He has authored 2 books, Woodward Avenue, a novel focusing on the street racing culture of 1970 Detroit and its surrounding communities. He also the novel is based on his screenplay by the same name, and it's a throwback car story based in 1970. The Milt, Schornack, and the Royal Bobcat GTOs is a biography about Schornack's work on the legendary Bobcat GTOs that were reworked factory fresh, a body Pontiacs from 1963 to 1970. Royal Oak Pontiac and the Royal Pontiac Bobcats became famous at racetracks across the USA thanks to Schornack's mechanical aptitude and drag race experience. And he says he's not an expert. He wrote humor for the funniest.com of Montreal, which is owned by Just for Laughs CEO Andy Newman. And he says, at my best, I am a humor writer. I founded the online humor columnist group, the NETWITS, in 1999, and have written, edited, and scripted humor for magazines, anthologies, and entertainment portals. I can write humor for practically any type of business or organization that needs to add some flair or lighten up their newsletters, magazines, or meetings. And I am exhausted. The man is a wizard. Good evening, my friend. How are you, Keith?
Good evening. How are you? I enjoyed hearing about myself. I didn't realize I had done all that stuff.
See, I bring the best out in people. This is just about what all of my guests say when I start introducing them. They say, boy, I didn't know I did all that. But then
right,
I'm very good. I'm very good at what I do.
I'm glad it was a long introduction, too, because after that scary intro of yours, I had to go change my underwear. I was just so scared. So,
as you should be.
But anyway, thank you very much. That was a fun intro to listen to. But yeah, I started as a humor writer, and it was only I'll tell you, I'll go way back to when I was had no idea that I was going to be a writer, and I was at the University of South Florida taking Creative Writing 101 in my freshman year, and my professor said, I want to see you after class. And I went, oh, boy. So I went back after class, and she was in her office, and she put down my first paper that I had written, and she said, I've never had a freshman come in here that can write like this. And she said, if you don't become a writer, you've wasted your life and you're a fool. And so from that day forward, I said, I'm going to be a writer because she must know, But anyway, from then on, I considered myself a writer, but it really took many years. Of course, as you know, you have to fine tune your craft. And I wrote 3 or 4 novels that I threw in the bottom of a file cabinet that'll never be seen. And going back and reading them, I do laugh at them. But anyway, I got into humor just because I lived on Martha's Vineyard, and I started writing humor columns for the Martha's Vineyard Gazette. And I wasn't even paid for it, but I just enjoyed getting all the feedback from the townies every week when my column went in. You know that feeling, when someone just enjoys your writing, and they said they had a good laugh. And so I founded the NETWITS, and that's when it all really took off for me, and that was late 90s. So that's how I started writing. I was already in my 40s, my early 40s when I started really. So.
Well, see,
but anyway, where do you want to start?
Well, that just goes to show that one is never too old to start living a dream. I published my first book in my late 50s, and like you, I've been writing all my life. Yeah, so it's when people say, "Well, I'm too old," or "Well, I can't do it now because I'm too old," or "I'm too tired," or "I'm too this," I'm thinking, I completely reinvented myself in my late 50s, so that dog doesn't hunt at all.
Sure.
So let's
go. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go with your thought.
Oh, okay. When I was writing the humor, I felt kind of alone. First of all, I was on an island to start with, Martha's Vineyard, and it was winter time, and I didn't have any other writers to talk to, even though there were writers there. But we were all kind of holed up on, it's winter on an island, it's 4 miles out in the Atlantic Ocean, so we, everything was kind of shut down. So I started the NETWITS group in '99, and I started just seeking out humor writers. And before I knew it, we had over 200 humor writers that were all posting. We used Yahoo Groups back then. It's an email list, and in fact, we still exist on Yahoo Groups, and it's still very active. But the writers would submit their columns for the other writers to criticize before they submitted it to their newspapers or to their blogs or wherever, whatever they were doing. We would all criticize, or we would just say, "Hey, great job, I laughed," or whatever. But it was so much fun because it was all just humor, and we had some people that really did very well. Bruce Cameron, for example, he wrote the books A Dog's Purpose and A Dog's Journey, which will be released as a movie later this month. In fact, it was produced a full-length Hollywood movie. He was writing for the Rocky Mountain Gazette in Boulder, Colorado. He wrote a column called 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter, and it became an ABC television show. And Bruce and I used to converse back and forth all the time, and helping talking about our columns and how, what's funny, what's not funny, and critiquing and all that. And a funny thing, we used to argue about who was funnier. Well, I guess Bruce was funnier because he got the TV show and he got the movie. So, but he was on Oprah with that Dog's Purpose. I mean, that went right through the roof. Everyone loves A Dog's Purpose, and he does much better writing about dogs than he does about humor. So, but anyway, that's Bruce, not me. But we all kind of got a boost when an Australian company said, "We want to take your 10 best NETWITS writers, and we'll pick them out, and we're going to publish a book in Brisbane, Australia." And they called the book Humor Us, a takeoff on Humorous. And so they published that in Australia in 1999. I actually had one of my articles read aloud at Bond University graduation because I wrote about an American playing rugby. I played rugby at USF, and I wrote an American's take on rugby, which they all got a big kick out of over there, in Australia. So Humorous was my first book, and it was actually never published in the United States. It was big in Australia with 9 other writers. It was an anthology. One of the other writers, Doug Powers, now writes for Michelle Malkin on her website and blog. Doug Powers, he's a conservative writer, and he's her head writer, Michelle Malkin's head writer. So we all went our separate ways, kind of, but we still stay in touch. And so that was my humor, really. I lost my muse. Pardon?
Well, we have to get you another muse. But that goes to prove that
what happened
people
was Go ahead.
I think what I'm trying to say is it goes to prove that it doesn't matter where you start with a dream. It can take you anywhere. Right.
And I stopped writing humor when my father died, and 2 weeks later 9/11 happened. And I just could not find the humor anywhere. And when I did try to put anything funny up online, people would say it's too early for humor. It's too early because of 9/11. The nation was in mourning. And
I wish I'd known then, because I'd have told you it's never too early for humor, even when we're grieving. Humor is healing.
I thought so too, but I was beaten down so many times for doing it that I just stopped doing it. There's too many people who are too sensitive.
That's not allowed. You got to get your muse back, Keith. You are a funny man.
Well, I try to write funny stuff on Facebook because I'm so political, and I'm unashamedly conservative, and so I post a lot of conservative stuff up there, and you know how people get with the politics these days. But I try to post as much funny as I can in order to keep people from unfriending me.
Well, I've had a few unfriend me, but
they might be waiting for some funny stuff. So.
Well, the thing is, number one, we take life too seriously. You think about it. None of us are going to get out of here alive.
Right.
And we take it way too seriously. whether it's politics, whether it's relationships, even ourselves, we take too blooming seriously. And when we do that, we lose so much in life that we can't enjoy because everything is so serious. Politics is so serious. He who is in the White House now, everybody got their panties in a wad when the anointed one didn't get elected or crowned, as the case may be, depending on which side of the fence you're on. So we get a businessman, and so the other side, they get their panties all in a wad. Get over it.
Right.
You're grown.
Yeah,
you're not 2 years old.
Right, and for someone like me, who, again, I'm a conservative. When Obama went into office, I said we're going to give the guy a chance. He needs to be able to have a chance to prove that he can be a president and do the right thing by the American people. And there were some things he actually did that weren't that bad, but eventually he just kind of turned me against him. I started out, I actually prayed for him that he would do well. I didn't want him to fail because if he failed, we failed.
Right.
And so I didn't want that to happen. But I saw things getting worse, and I'm not blaming him for that either. But I think he threw gas on the fire rather than water. I
agree.
And throughout the 8 years, I think he threw gas. And so that's every time I turned around, when I thought he would do A, he would always do B. And when I thought he'd do B, he would do A. And I was confounded by it. I would say, why does he do the opposite of what everybody wants? So
did you feel like you were in a Abbott and Costello Who's on First dialogue?
Kind of, yes.
and for those of you that are too young to remember Abbott and Costello, they did a great skit called Who's on First. Go look it up on YouTube. It's fall down funny.
Right. Oh yeah, it's worth watching. But anyway, I didn't want to call in to talk politics. I wanted to talk about books and all that.
We want to talk about Keith.
What happened in about a year and a half later was I was cruising along a nice ocean road in Massachusetts that goes by Endicott College in Beverly, Massachusetts on Route 127. And coming the other way was a Pontiac GTO. And I hadn't seen a GTO for many years, and I knew right off the bat that it was a 73 because when I was a kid, I was a car nut, and so I knew that it was a 1973 GTO, and I was like, wow, I want a GTO. So within about 6 months of searching, I had a car shipped across on the Vineyard Ferry, and there was a GTO, the second GTO on the island. Believe it or not, the only other GTO on the island was Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Wow.
I'm sorry, John F. Kennedy Jr. I'm sorry. JFK Jr. had a black 69 GTO on the island, and I had a 72 GTO on the island. We were the only ones with the GTOs, so that was kind of fun. But I got so much into the cars that I said, I'm going to start writing about cars. And it just so happened I was elected to the position of president of the Bay State Tigers GTO Association in Massachusetts. It was the statewide GTO club, and I started putting together some really great meetings and stuff, and the club became very active, which it had been kind of stagnant. So I got that all going, and we decided to have a big show. And bring Pontiacs from all over New England if we could get them. We would advertise everywhere. And we decided to bring in Milt Schornack from Detroit. We would fly him in with his wife and have him speak, and everybody would go crazy because he's a legend in GTO history, Pontiac history. And so I had dinner with Milt, and I had dinner with the editor-in-chief of Performance Pontiac magazine, Thomas DeMoro, who now writes for Hemmings, which is one of the best automotive publications in the country up in Burlington, Vermont. But anyway, Tom DeMoro and his wife and kids and Milt and his wife and myself, we all had dinner together one night, and I got to know Milt very well and spoke with him on the phone several times. And one day he called me and he said, can you get a hold of Tom DeMoro? I want to see if he'll write my biography. So I emailed Tom, I called Tom, I emailed Tom, I called Tom. and he didn't answer. So I called Milt back and I said, hey, Milt, I would love to write your biography. And so I called my agent, and within a month she had sold it to McFarland Publishers in North Carolina. McFarland, they do scholastic books mostly, but they've been getting into automotive and sports. So they were very happy to get a historical book on the Pontiac GTO. And it took me 18 months. We got it done. Milt still sent me these scratchy CDs that he recorded his life history on. He'd send me 1 year every week, 1963, then 1964, and I would get a migraine listening to that because I think he bought his microphone probably at Kmart, and the recorder he may have found in a junkyard. So that's how bad it was. So I would take 3 Advil before starting to listen to his recordings, and it really sounded like I was listening to a 1930s radio. But we got it done, and I had all those CDs of him, for each year, and I put it all together in the book. And then we had great cooperation from General Motors. They sent me so many pictures that had never before been published from the 60s of the GTOs from 64 through 1970. And can you hear my dog barking, by the way? My dog is out back being a jerk. But anyway, good, because he just decided there's something out there he wants to bark at. That's good. But anyway, so the book came out, and I started attending some of the national events at GTO organizations and Pontiac Oakland Club International in Greensboro, South Carolina. I went to Detroit for the 40th anniversary of the GTO, and I pushed the book, and Milt pushed the book, and we sold thousands of copies. And so I started writing some. Pardon me?
Is this one still in print?
Yes, it is. In fact, it came out in 2007, in December, I believe, of 2007, and it has reprinted every year because McFarland is still selling enough of them each year. They put it in their catalog for 10 straight years. And in fact, They sent me this year's catalog, and they said, congratulations, you're still in the catalog. So yet another year of me getting my royalties and all that from McFarland, which is great. But it's dwindled quite a bit. Now I go out to dinner on the royalties or something. At least I'm still getting them. You know how it goes.
Well, for those that don't know, because, see, I remember the GTOs. And I also remember when the kids had them in 64, 65, 67, 68, and 6, because I graduated high school in 69. GTO was a popular vehicle. And the boys all called them their goat. They were a goat.
Right.
They didn't call them GTO. Yep. They were a goat.
That's right.
And I'm thinking, those were a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful car. Probably one of the best ones made at the time.
Right. It was based on the A-body General Motors, which is also the Chevelle, the Olds Cutlass, and the Buick Skylark. And they all used the same chassis, but they, of course, had different bodies. But the GTO had the lines, and the people just loved the lines of that Pontiac. It was a very, 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 very nicely designed car. And they had those front bumpers. Remember the commercials where they hit the front bumpers with a crowbar? Because they had the rubber bumpers. They were the first ones to have the rubber bumpers, and everybody loved that. And so they became very popular, and they sold. And a lot of people don't know this, but John DeLorean, who created the DeLorean car, which we all know from Back to the Future, but John DeLorean is the guy that invented the GTO.
I did not know that.
He was working for Pontiac at the time. Yeah, there was one weekend they used to have the engineers would have a Saturday, basically a brain drain. They'd all go to the track with the Pontiac cars and trade off ideas. And one day he said, let's drop a 389 with 3 two-barrels into this little Pontiac Le Mans here and see what happens. And he ended up driving it for a few weeks, and then he ended up sharing it with some of the other engineers and then the executives, and they decided they put out a GTO. And so one of the head guy from at the time at Pontiac said, you won't even sell 5,000 of these. And they bet, I guess they bet a dinner on it. And they ended up selling, I believe it was 19 or 21,000. so the guy had to buy John DeLorean dinner. So that was the GTO took off after that. Of course, Ronnie and the Daytonas had that song "Little GTO," and it was just it became a cult kind of a cult classic car in a way. But it was the Monkees had a GTO. I Dream of Jeannie, Major Nelson drove a GTO. My three sons, the oldest son had a GTO. I mean, they just had them all over the television, so you would want to get a GTO back then. So it was very, very popular car.
They were as popular, if not more popular, than the Mustangs at that time.
Well, the Mustang was less expensive and it sold more, but it didn't have that performance. It really didn't have that performance tag that the GTO had. Now the Mustang did have the Mach 1 that came out, and it did have the Mustang, the GTs, and the K code they called it. But those were, and they were performance, but they just weren't. They didn't have the pizzazz of the GTO. I mean, there's a lot of Mustang people that'll disagree with me, and I don't blame them a bit for that. But the GTO just really kind of ruled the road for the mid to late 60s. And there were cars that came out that were faster, but the GTO just had that stigma about it. And I'm sure because you remember it, a lot of people that are older remember that car. It was just a great, great car.
Well, it was. It looked rich. It looked elegant.
Yes,
it looked. The GTO, in my opinion, humble that it is, because I'm not a car aficionado, sad to say, but to me, it had that look of simple elegance with enough horsepower under it to burn anything off the road for miles.
Right. And so that was. But anyway, I wrote that book about the Pontiac GTO for Milt Schornack, and like I said, McFarlane still prints it and puts it out every year and keeps it stocked at Amazon for us. And I've seen it being sold on eBay for $60 or $70, even though you can still buy it on Amazon. But Amazon has also gone up on the price of it. I don't know why, but they went up to $35, and it's a paperback. So I don't know why they did that. They went from $25 to $35, and I have no idea why. But I guess they figure they can get the money for them. I don't know. But we got good reviews in all the car magazines, and it was really a lot of fun to do.
Supply and demand.
So, pardon?
I mean, because think about it, Keith. Everywhere you go now, just like down in Stewart, up in Daytona, they have the classic car shows. And you have that group of baby boomers that are into the older cars. And they're going to buy up everything they can to either restore a car they bought or see if the car they have is restored to the specs that the original car should have been. Yes,
right. Absolutely. And you know something? There are over 25 million classic cars in North America now.
I did not know that.
25 million. It's a huge business, and it's a huge hobby. And there are companies that just live making these parts for the old cars. They have gigantic warehouses and mail order every day. They're busy, and they're very successful. And if they don't make a quality product, they go out really quickly because these guys want the best for these cars.
And they're willing to pay for it.
Oh, yeah. But the sad part is that the younger kids can't afford these cars, and so they have to wait for them to be passed down to them, basically, because the prices are crazy. Now, for example, tomorrow in Kissimmee, the Mecum Auto Auction starts. There are 3,000 cars, mostly muscle cars, going off over the next 10 days in Kissimmee at the Osceola Heritage Park. It all starts tomorrow, tent after tent after tent, filled with cars, and they're all classics. And some are $1 million cars now. The 1970 Hemi Cuda convertible sold for $1.3 million last year, and that you could buy that car for $3,900 back in the day, and it sold for $1.3 million. They had a big sign on the car, "Do not touch this car." And I looked at my friend and I said, "I got to touch this car. It's just sold for $1.3 million." I went over to put my finger on it. They said, I touched the car.
But you think about it.
Another great thing at Mecum happening, it's going to be on television, by the way, next week on NBC Sportsnet, and you can watch 25 hours of these cars being sold or going over the auction block. It's actually, there's a Barrett Jackson show down in West Palm Beach that takes place in April, I believe it is, and they have about 700. So these guys have 4 times more cars than the biggest auction house in the country, which is Barrett Jackson. But Mecum is growing in leaps and bounds, and they're becoming the muscle car auction house. And so it's going to be very interesting to see. I'm going to head out there myself to watch some of these cars, to see some of these awesome cars that are going off over there.
Now, for the people that don't, for people that don't understand the terminology that you're using, the terminology muscle car, explain to the audience what that means. I know what it means because I was brought up during that era, but because some of the younger people go, what the hell's a muscle car? So explain to the audience what a muscle car is.
A muscle car is it's any car that has a high-performance engine, high-performance braking, transmission, suspension, and it's built for speed. It's built for handling. Back in the day, now the muscle cars back in the '60s, they weren't called that. They were called supercars. And the supercars, they were the GTOs, the Chevelle Super Sport, the Mustang Mach 1, the Boss Mustangs, the Hemi Cudas, and the Challenger RT, and even the American Motors had an AMX, and they were all called supercars. They didn't start calling them muscle cars, I believe, until about the mid '70s, and the reason they called them that was almost derogatory, because they were making fun of people that owned them because they were gas guzzlers, and there was a big movement towards better gas mileage and lower compression, lower horsepower, and so everybody was kind of, those are muscle cars. It was almost derogatory, but then it became a badge of honor as time went by. And but a muscle car from then, they're making muscle cars again. We're in a new era of muscle cars. You see the Challenger has been re-released by Chrysler. The Camaro has been re-released by General Motors. They're beautiful cars. And, of course, the Mustang has hung in there, and the new Mustang GTs and the Shelbys, and they're fantastic. They're high horsepower, great handling, very, very sporty, aerodynamic. They're muscle cars. The muscle car is back. So that's a great thing for the car people and for the younger kids. As they get older, they could buy a 2013 Camaro SS, and they'll have a muscle car. Even though it's not old from the 60s, it'll still be considered a muscle car. So that's good. It's good. But, yeah, muscle car is basically everyone really refers to a high-horse-powered car, mostly a V8.
And would you agree? And the Thunderbirds back in the day were, I would dare to say, along that line, my ex-husband and I owned a T-Bird, and it was an amazing vehicle.
Yeah. Now, was that a two-seater? Or the two-seater? Yes. The Corvettes and the Thunderbirds are not considered muscle cars, really, technically, because they're considered sports cars, because they're two-seaters.
That's true.
And so when you have you talk muscle cars, a lot of times Corvette doesn't fall into the conversation as much, although there are plenty of Corvettes that are well overpowered and very much muscle cars. But they still to this day even consider them to be sports cars because of the two seats rather than four.
Would you agree that the cars of our day and time had more personality? Yeah, some of them are well built now and sleek and elegant looking. But when I go to a car lot to look for a vehicle, that vehicle has to jump out and say, hey, here I am, take me home, because I'm the only one like me out here. Right, and now when I go to a car lot, they all say that they all look the same. There's no personality in them.
I agree. They are all shaped like jelly beans, and they don't. And there's really not that much difference. I mean, you can look at all these mid-sized SUVs like the Nissan Murano and the Santa Fe by Hyundai, and they all look the same. And Ford came out with some newer ones that look a little bit different, but they still basically have what I call the jelly bean shape. Back then, the cars had character, and you would not see them released all year long. Back then, we all waited for September because all the cars would be unveiled in September. And it was a lot of fun, and there was a lot of excitement they generated. Now they don't generate as much excitement because it happens all year long. You know, they'll release a 2018 Toyota next week or something. And you'll say, wait a minute, you know, it's still 2017. Well, this is what we're going to release in 18, so we're going to start making them now. You know, I mean, it's crazy.
And what else they would do is they would, because they would hold the body and the style and everything. It was like a big trade secret. If the trade secret got out, somebody was going to get in some serious trouble.
That's right. In fact, Milt Schornack, in the book I wrote, Milt Schornack and the Royal Bobcat GTOs, one night he was working a little late and a big tractor trailer pulled up, and it had shrouds on the side. And when it was dark, they backed the truck into the big truck into the back of the dealership, Royal Oak Pontiac, and they pulled off the brand new 1968 GTOs, which are all redesigned, and they hid them from the public. And what they did was they had the Pontiac guys in the shop work the engines a little bit, give them what was called the Bobcat treatment, put the cars back on the truck, and bring them back over to Pontiac. So, excuse me again. And then what happened was they'd park them, and then the magazine pool would come by, the writers, and they'd say, take that car. And these guys would get in these cars and go, whoa, this car is incredible. But what was happening is they were worked. They were driving worked over engines that had been, you know, souped up to with you know, maybe 20 horsepower more than what you could buy off the showroom. But they were just aghast at these cars. But they were very, very secretive. And once the cars were about to be released, they'd actually slide them out the back door of the factories and let them run up and down Woodward Avenue. That's where Woodward Avenue in Detroit got its reputation. These cars would run up and down Woodward Avenue all night long, racing other cars and going off to the side highways and dragging and testing the cars right out on the road because all the baby boomers, mostly guys, couldn't wait to kill themselves in these cars. They wanted the fastest cars that came out of the factories, and every year they got faster and faster and stronger and more powerful than the year before. And there was quite a time. There was a book called Glory Days written by Jim Wangers, who was an ad agent for Pontiac back then. And it's Glory Days is a great book. It tells you all about the competition and the cars that were coming out and all the shenanigans that happened in the background. Not to plug someone else's book, but it is a good read. So, and Jim's a good guy.
That's what we do, and especially your love of cars, it comes through in your voice. And remember in 1964 when they put out the 64 Mustang, which we called a horse. They put that out, and then about 6 months later, they got this wild hair, and they put out another new one, and it was a 64 and a half.
Right. Well, actually, it was 64 and a half, and then 6 months later, they put out the 65, I believe it was. In April of 64, they put out the 64 and a half Mustang at the New York World's Fair, and guess who got to see that? Me. I was only 8 years old. I was 8 years old, and I saw that Mustang. It was a white Mustang on display, and I saw the car, the very first Mustang that they put on display, and that was a 64 and a half. And I believe they called it a 65. You know, I'd have to look it up. I don't want to misquote. But where were you headed with that?
Well, it just struck me. I was thinking about all the cars that were produced during the years that I was in high school, and the one that stuck out was a 64 and a half because they only made so many. And kids were running around trying to buy this car, and once they were gone, they made maybe like 1,000, just for the sake of this discussion, let's just say 1,000, and once they were gone, they were gone. They didn't make it.
They went right to the 65 model. Yeah. Yeah, I believe they made the 64.5 and 64 World's Fair, and then the 65s came out in September, just a few months later, because it was the new model year. But I know it was at the 60.
I was agreeing with you.
Oh! I thought you said why.
No.
But that was smart, because they had the Mustang. It was very popular, and then they hit them right away with a brand new 65 model, which included fastbacks and what they called the K code that had a V8, a 289 cubic inch V8 in it, and it was sportier, had better suspension, and it just looked cool. It had side vents on the rear panels, the rear sail panels they call them. It was just a sharp car, and so they did well with that. But they were competing right away with the GTO. Really, it was the 64 GTO came out, and it was all the rage. So. And everybody followed suit in 65. We had the Chevelle SS's. They came out in 64 as well, but, I mean, everything started to really hit big in 65. And it was a great time. I was a kid. I couldn't drive. I was very young, but I still remember them all because I love cars.
Well, speaking of cars, let's talk about, you just released a book called Woodward Avenue II. You said you released it right before Thanksgiving. But before that, you released Woodward Avenue, which was the first book. And that one is about street racing, correct?
Yes, they both are. And they have the same characters. It's just like a sequel book. Ground Pounders, Woodward Avenue II Ground Pounders, which was just released, is a sequel to Woodward Avenue, which came out way back in 2005. It took me forever to rewrite it. I wrote the first one with my Australian friend, Jim Richards, who I ended up writing screenplays with. Now, it's hard to, it's kind of a weird path I took. But when I was on Martha's Vineyard in the winter, I bumped into Marty Nadler. Marty Nadler was the head writer for Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley for many years. And Marty had basically retired to Martha's Vineyard because he worked his butt off for many, many years. And he said, I came out of Hollywood. I didn't even know what I was getting paid on Happy Days, and my wife told me we were millionaires. And so he retired to Martha's Vineyard, and he said, I was lucky enough to be tutored in screenwriting by Marty Nadler, who wrote all those Happy Days shows. And he told me how to write for television, how to write for movies. And so what I did was I started to write Woodward Avenue, the screenplay about a guy that comes home from Vietnam and gets involved in the whole street racing scene of Detroit's Woodward Avenue. And what happened was my friend Jim Richards from Australia, who was one of the writers in the NETWITS book, he was a humor writer. He was a muscle car guy. He loved American muscle cars, and he wanted to be involved in the project. So we would write the movie Woodward Avenue. I would write it during the day and email it to him before I went to bed. Right when he's getting out of bed in Australia, I'd wake up the next morning and he wrote all night, and I would have his version. I would proofread it to knock out all the stupid Australian terms. I shouldn't call them stupid. They're just Aussie terms. And then then I would write during the day, and I'd ship it back to Jim that night. Anyway, we wrote that screenplay, and we submitted it to the Action on Film Film Festival, and out of 700 screenplays, we made top 10.
Wow!
And then we made top 5, and then we were eliminated. But we got down to the top 5 for best action film, and so we said, how are we going to sell this in Hollywood? Well, Hollywood thinks that authors are much, much smarter than screenwriters. So we said, let's write the book. So then we went back to work again, and we wrote Woodward Avenue in the novel form, but it had already been written in screenplay form. So we did the reverse. Instead of doing, instead of moving it, rewriting a book into a screenplay, we did it the other way around, and we made a novel out of the screenplay, and put that up. We self-published that on Lulu, which is a pretty good company, and we sold many, many, many copies of Woodward Avenue. And then for years, I kept trying to write Woodward Avenue II, and I just kept getting writer's block, and I got involved in writing other projects. I write for racingjunk.com. I write for the Press Journal, Vero Beach Newsweekly. I cover the car shows in the area. I've done a few new car reviews like Cadillac and Chevrolet, and I also write for, there's a magazine that I've been writing for now, Car Kulture Deluxe. It's a new magazine, Car Kulture with a K. Car Kulture Deluxe is another magazine that I'm writing for now. So I write for racingjunk.com, which is a really big readership, and then Car Kulture Deluxe, which is a nationally published magazine. And, of course, like I said, the Vero Beach Newsweekly. And I have the radio show. I do now the radio show is now only on Friday and Saturday nights. We cut it down. It was too much writing for me. It would take me 8 hours to write the 2 shows every week, and I just didn't have the time. So now I'm just writing 1 show, and then it repeats on Saturday. Friday night at 5, Saturday night repeat, and that's it. On WAXE.
You're a busy man.
Well, yeah, I try to be. It's a labor of love.
So Woodward Avenue 2, it picks up where Woodward Avenue 1 leaves off at the end of the book?
Yes, it does. Yeah, yes, it does. It's almost like the Star Wars movies, except I don't have the 3 really bad ones. But it picks up right where the old one left off.
Now, can people still order the first one on Amazon?
Yes, they can. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so if they wanted to order the first one and then order the second one, so they would know what they're reading, they probably would be easy as standalones, but when you have a sequence like that, you like for them to read the first one and then the second one so people know what's going on.
Right. Yeah, so there's Woodward Avenue and Woodward Avenue 2, but I called the second one Woodward Avenue 2 Ground Pounders. I wanted to have a clever name to set it apart from the first one. So it's Woodward Avenue 2 Ground Pounders. Now, Woodward Avenue, by the way, they have the Woodward Avenue Dream Cruise every summer, and I believe it takes place in August. And the Dream Cruise this year had 44,000 cars.
Wow.
In the Dream Cruise, 2.5 million spectators. It's the biggest event in the country, and the media doesn't even pay attention to it.
Wonder why?
I don't know. It's just huge. I mean, you can see it on Velocity Channel. You can see it a little bit on NBC Sportsnet or something, but and you'll see it in the Detroit papers, but you just don't see it on the news and stuff. You just don't see it, but it's a gigantic event.
You ought to go up there and do a live remote.
Yeah, I know, huh? I mean,
wouldn't that be cool?
I went there a few years ago. Well, it was actually more than 10 years ago. And it's just amazing. It's just really, it gets bigger and bigger every year. 44,000 vehicles. They're not all classics, of course, because as I mentioned, there's 25 million cars, classic cars in North America. That includes Canada, by the way. But still, 44,000 cars to show up for that. That's just an amazing turnout. And it's an all-day thing. You sit there all day and watch these cars roll by. So lots of fun. It's just a really fun hobby.
We're gonna run out of time here shortly. Yeah, the hour flew by, ladies and gentlemen. It always does. Keith and I were talking about that earlier, how fast this hour flies by. But I'm bringing you back, right, Keith?
Yes, I'll be back.
He'll be back, ladies and gentlemen. But what I want you to do is tell the folks where you can be found.
Okay. We have our radio show is on Facebook. It's facebook.com/American Car Classics. So you can find us there. You can find me at just it's facebook.com/Keith McDonald. And I'm at Twitter. It's Max_Wax, MACS_Wax, because I used to sell automotive waxes as a side hobby. I found some great waxes out in California, and I would ship them over here, rebottle them up as my own, and sell them. But I stopped doing that several years ago. But I kept the Twitter name because I had so many followers on Twitter that I stuck with Max Wax. But you can so again, Facebook and on Twitter, and also again on radio Friday nights WAXE 107.9 FM, 1370 AM every Friday at 5, Saturday at 5, and we talk about classic cars. Tomorrow night, in fact, we have John Craman, who is the voice of Mecum Auctions for, and he's been on NBC. He's a announcer for NBC Sportsnet. He does the car shows for them, the auctions for Mecum on NBC Sports, and he will be on our show tomorrow night on Friday night, which will be a lot of fun.
It sounds like it will be a huge feather in your cap, especially with people that are car aficionados, and you say you're not a classic car expert.
Well, see, here's the thing, because I know that John Craman is coming on, and he is the encyclopedia of cars. I mean, this guy, he's forgotten more than I know. He's just incredible. So he's the guy you want to talk to about classic cars. He doesn't need a book in front of him. He doesn't need to research anything. He comes right off the top of his head. He's really a genius when it comes to older cars, classic cars, especially muscle. So finally, I guess, I kind of downplay the whole Haswapper thing I did with the BP oil spill. I just wanted to go out and do something when the Gulf was being destroyed. I wanted to go out and volunteer. I got paid to do it, but I wanted to get out there and help, and so I did that, and it was a horrible experience, and but I'm glad I did it because I feel like I helped.
Well,
but it was.
The thing is, even though it was a horrible experience, you still learned something, and that is that we have to protect our environment. And when men create their own disasters, that's a problem. Right. We could do a whole show on that.
Oh, sure you can. But it was something else. It really was, and it was incredibly hot, and it was just so miserable every day. And BP, they had us working 14-hour days, no days off, one day off every 21st day.
Good Lord.
And then back to work again. And if you missed a day, you were easily replaced because they would just throw you out and bring in, because there was a whole line of people waiting for the work, to get in there to do all that work. But they treated us pretty good, but they also treated us pretty badly as well at the same time. It's one hand was feeding us and the other hand was stabbing us in the back. But it was a great experience. It really was.
And, of course, you wouldn't trade it for anything because it was a learning experience. It was a learning experience for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I thought I'd write a movie about it because it was a big patent place out there. It really was.
Well, see,
there's just as many women out there cleaning as there were guys. And so you can imagine what was going on in those crews. But
there's your next
I decided not to.
Oh,
it would
come
make a fun
on,
book.
Keith. It would make a fun book.
You know what really bothered me?
What's that?
I went through the extra classes to get supervisor status. And when I went down there and I got on a crew and I wanted to be a supervisor and I had my card, I'm a supervisor. Well, we already have a supervisor. Every supervisor didn't have a card to be a supervisor, and they all have like neck tattoos, they shaved heads with tattoos on their heads, and they were those kind of guys, like really tough guy, alpha male. They didn't use their brains; they just used their bronze and barked at everybody, and it was kind of horrible. They just weren't. They weren't leaders. They were just thugs, and it was terrible. But anyway, that's water under the bridge, and it was a great It really was a great learning experience.
Well, ladies and gentlemen,
so we're almost done.
as you can see, anything goes on Off the Chain because that's why we call it Off the Chain. Yes, the show is not scripted. And the reason for that is because when I talk to my guest, I never know what path we're going to take or how long we're going to take that path.
Right.
And just like Keith had a dream, and his dream was to write, and it took him many years to actually get there, but he did that dream. So in about 2 minutes, Keith, tell me, if someone comes to you and says, I have a dream, but, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that you can't you'll never get anything done unless you sit down. As far as writing goes, you have to sit yourself down and do it. There's so many people that tell me I have a great novel in my head. You have to put it down on paper or on your computer. You have to sit down and spend the time. You have to close off the entire world and make yourself comfortable with a beverage of your choice, a coffee, a hot chocolate, or whatever you like, and sit down and do it. And don't let anyone stop you or distract you. And there's one big rule that kept me going. I believe it was Hemingway that said, writing a book is not that hard, but the last few chapters are like the final rounds of a prize fight. When you're writing those final few chapters, you are just exhausted, and you know you're near the end, but you're taking punches, and you're debating whether you've done the right thing, and you're wondering if the plot's going to all come together. It really is like a prize fight at the end. He was absolutely right. And I always remember that. All 3 books were very, very hard to finish up. They really were. But you have to do it.
And when you get to the end of it, you're exhausted.
Yes, you are.
Totally.
But, boy, what a feeling when you're done, isn't it, Yvonne? I mean, you just say, wow, I am done. you stand up and you look and you go, look, I'm done.
And then the other muse in your head starts saying, my turn, my turn, my turn, my turn. And you want to say, give me a break.
Right.
Just
that's
give
right.
me a
you
break.
You need a break after that. You need to. That's why, I finished Woodward Avenue II last November. I'm not ready to start writing another book until probably November again of this year, next fall. Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, go to Amazon, not now, when the show ends. Go to Amazon and look up books written by Keith McDonald. I promise you'll love them.
Right, they're M-A-C, Keith MacDonald.
Why did I say Keith Donald? Because it's late and I go brain stupid after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So thank you for that correction. Keith MacDonald, Woodward
M-A-C,
Avenue.
Right, I'm a Scotsman, not an Irishman.
There you go. Woodward Avenue 2, and then the one that he wrote about Milt Schornack and Royal Bob.
Right. Just search Milt Schornack on Google. It'll bring you right to Amazon.
Tomorrow night, my guest will be the CEO of Bella Lily Sunshine Designers, Melissa Pendergast. She has her own clothing design shop, and I'm going to tell you, this girl is absolutely amazing. I don't know how she does it with 2 wee ones, but she does. On Saturday night, I will have horror author Frank Bittinger back in my little cave, and who knows where we will go or where the conversation will lead, because he likes all things Egyptian, so we will see what happens there. Thank you so much for spending an hour with me. I appreciate you more than you know, and I'm bringing you back.
It was my pleasure, believe me, Yvonne.
You're welcome.
And I have to be honest. I only allowed this because I didn't want you to let the flying monkeys out on me.
Oh, that was good. That was really good. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I have flying monkeys, and I do release them time and time again. And Keith does that. And I get results, don't I?
Yes, you do.
So, ladies and gentlemen, those of you that have listened to me from the beginning, you know that I always end my show with live your dream, love yourself, like yourself, be kind to yourself, because you are all that you have. Yes, you have family. Yes, you have friends. But at the end of the day, when you're laying there on your deathbed and someone says, do you have any regrets? Don't have any regrets, because life is too short and none of us get out alive. So I say this, and we will see you all tomorrow evening, Lord willing, and the creeks don't rise. And yes, it's a southern thing. Join us then at 8 o'clock for Off the Chain with me, your host, Ron Mason. Hang on just a minute, Keith, when this thing goes off, because I want to tell you a couple of things.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome very much. Now, what I will do is, as soon as we get off from here, this thing will load up into archives, and once it gets loaded up into archives, I will tag you in it on Facebook. And then tomorrow, I will upload it on Spreaker, on podcast.com, on Mixcloud, and on SoundCloud. And then it goes from here, from the Blog Talk Radio Show, it goes to iTunes and to Stitcher. And Stitcher's heard on Sirius Radio.
Wow.
When I load it up to Spreaker, it will go to TuneIn Radio, YouTube, FM.com.
Wow.
And that's why
pretty clever of you.
Yeah, that's why we have over 6,500 listeners all over the world.
That's great.
United Arab Emirates, the Philippines, India, Nigeria, England, Canada, Guyana. Those are just the ones I can remember.
That's fantastic.
So we're growing by leaps and bounds. And the reason we're growing so fast is because I do upload the show on other podcasts and get a whole different dynamic of people.
Right. That's fantastic.
And so when I upload them, I will tag you in the podcast as well. And my gift to you all is take all of those links and promote the daylights out of them, because it is your show, it is your product, it is your marketing tool to do with as you wish.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, my dear, and I will get this to you shortly. Thank you for being on my show.
Okay, great. Thanks, Yvonne. It was so nice talking to you finally.
And I will get you a new date for April or May. I'll send it to you.
Okay,
if not
great.
tonight, then tomorrow.
Okay,
All right, my dear.
Whenever you're ready. All right, thank you
sweetheart.
so much. Have a good night. Okay,
you
bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye.
There is more to me, Queen Eliara of Elfgard, than my elven magic. Just as there's more to Geico than saving you money, Geico also gives you 24/7 access to licensed agents online, on the phone, or on the Geico app. And while I am a mighty elf queen, I am also a mighty big fan of barbecue potato chips. Minions! More smoky mesquite.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
Yo, everybody get up! Everybody get up! Everybody needs to understand that I'm more than simply a hype man for this rap group, just like Geico is more than just a company that can save you money. Geico also has fast and friendly claim service, so they can help you when you need it most. And while I do love being a hype man, I also love reading for children's audiobooks. Like Little Bo Peep, she lost a sheep, and she don't know where to find them. Yo!
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.